this guy, the Indus Valley civilization, because it's my all-time favorite. The Indus Valley civilization was located in the floodplain of the Indus and Sawardi rivers, and it was about the best place in the world.
For decades, those tiny carvings from the Indus Valley felt like taunts from the past. Beautiful, mysterious, and completely unreadable. Every archaeologist dreamed of hearing what those ancient people were trying to say. Now, an unlikely hero has done it: artificial intelligence. With a few billion calculations, it cracked a language that had been silent for 4 millennia. And what it revealed about the people who once spoke it is both inspiring and unsettling. AI doing its work. Researchers have been trying to read the Indus script for over a century, and until recently, every attempt ended the same way, with educated guesses and unanswered questions. The Indus Valley civilization left behind thousands of inscriptions carved on seals, tools, and pottery, yet no one could say for certain what any of it meant. The challenge wasn't just in the symbols themselves, it was that there was no reference point. Unlike Egyptian hieroglyphs, which were decoded with the help of the Rosetta Stone, the Indus script had no translation key, no bilingual record, and no surviving descendants in a modern language. It was a puzzle with most of its pieces missing. That's what made the new AI-led approach so different. Instead of searching for human-made connections, researchers decided to let algorithms look for patterns on their own. They began by compiling one of the largest digital databases of Indus symbols ever made. Thousands of high-resolution images from archaeological digs across India and Pakistan. Each image was tagged, categorized, and fed into deep learning models similar to those used in natural language processing. The same kind of technology that helps computers understand human speech today. The idea was simple. If the Indus script was truly a form of writing, it would have internal logic, rules about how symbols appear, what can follow what, and how often certain combinations repeat. The AI analyzed these relationships not by meaning, but by structure. It looked at how often a symbol showed up at the beginning of an inscription, which ones tended to appear in the middle, and which usually came last. Over time, the program began to notice regularities that looked a lot like grammar. One of the first breakthroughs came when researchers realized that certain symbols consistently acted like markers, possibly indicating ownership, profession, or status. Others appeared to modify these words, functioning the way adjectives or descriptors do in modern languages. The AI also found recurring pairs and triplets of symbols that always appeared together, suggesting fixed expressions or phrases. It was the kind of statistical consistency that's very hard to fake unless you're looking at a real language. To test the results, the team compared the structure of the Indus inscriptions to other ancient writing systems, especially early Sumerian and Proto-Dravidian. The comparisons weren't perfect, but there were enough similarities to suggest a possible linguistic link. Some of the symbol clusters seemed to represent sounds or syllables rather than whole words, and a few even resembled known Proto-Dravidian roots related to trade, water, or livestock. For the first time, researchers had evidence that the Indus script wasn't just symbolic or decorative, it carried meaning. The next step was to check whether those meanings lined up with archaeological context. Many of the seals that carried inscriptions also featured images, like a bull, a fish, or a person in prayer. When the AI cross-referenced the words that appeared alongside certain images, it found consistent associations. For example, seals with a water buffalo often included the same cluster of signs, which might indicate ownership, clan identity, or a trademark. Others depicted what looked like ritual scenes, and the inscriptions accompanying them contained recurring patterns that could represent prayers or dedications. Slowly, the pieces started coming together. By combining linguistic structure with contextual clues, the AI reconstructed short phrases that made sense in their settings. Records of trade goods, personal names, or titles linked to religion and governance. These weren't full sentences by modern standards, but they were coherent fragments. Evidence that the Indus people had a written language that recorded their daily lives. The most unexpected discovery came later. When the system began grouping inscriptions by region and time period, it noticed something even more sophisticated. The grammar and symbol usage changed slightly, depending on location, like dialects. Seals from Harappa showed subtle differences compared to those from Mohenjo-Daro or Lothal. This variation suggested that the Indus script wasn't static. It evolved and adapted across regions, just as living languages do. That single finding transformed how archaeologists viewed the Indus Valley civilization. It wasn't just a collection of city-states. It was a network of cultures sharing a common but dynamic language system. Even more intriguing, some of the reconstructed words seemed to express ideas rather than mere labels. A few symbols appeared only in religious contexts and might have represented moral or spiritual concepts, words for purity, balance, or truth. Others hinted at social order, terms possibly linked to equality or cooperation. If these interpretations hold up under further study, they suggest that the Indus people recorded not only transactions and titles, but also beliefs and values. The AI's success doesn't mean the mystery is completely solved. Many inscriptions remain too short or damaged to decode fully, and without a confirmed translation, much of the work is still probabilistic. But the progress is real. For the first time, the patterns of the Indus script align with the logic of human language. And that alignment opens a door no one could push open before.
So in these squares, if you look at the values, in each square, the bottom left is Brahmi, the bottom right is Indus script. So you can see how similar they are.
And what those voices are beginning to say may completely reshape how we understand one of humanity's first great civilizations. The real surprise came after the decoding began to make sense, because the words hidden in those ancient symbols didn't just describe a civilization. They revealed how its people thought, lived, and saw the world. Message delivered to our time. When the AI began to produce the first readable fragments, the results caught everyone off guard. The early translations didn't reveal epic poems or royal decrees. They revealed everyday life. Many of the symbols appeared to represent things that were surprisingly practical. Inventories of grain, trade transactions, records of goods moving between cities. The Indus Valley, it turned out, was a civilization that documented its world in concise, efficient terms, using a script designed for clarity rather than flourish. But among those business-like records, something unexpected started to appear. Some inscriptions carried recurring phrases that weren't connected to trade or property. They appeared instead on ceremonial objects, figurines, and temple artifacts. When translated, they seemed to reference ideas rather than things, concepts like purity, balance, and harmony. It was the first hint that the Indus language didn't just describe life, it reflected a worldview. Researchers began to map out these terms and their contexts. Certain symbols appeared consistently near depictions of animals, particularly the bull, elephant, and fish, creatures often seen as sacred or symbolic in later South Asian cultures. The AI noticed that inscriptions associated with these animals often contained overlapping vocabulary, implying shared spiritual or cultural meaning. While there's no proof that the Indus people worshipped in the same way later civilizations did, the language hinted at an early belief system built around nature, coexistence, and order. One cluster of symbols stood out. It showed up in contexts related to community gatherings and resource distribution, contexts where fairness and equality might have been important. The corresponding translation suggested something like shared measure or equal portion. If accurate, this would point to a remarkably progressive principle embedded in their social system. equity as a core value. For a society that existed more than 4,000 years ago, that's a powerful message. Another intriguing finding came from the way personal names appeared, or rather, didn't. Unlike Mesopotamian or Egyptian inscriptions that constantly referenced kings, rulers, or deities, the Indus script rarely mentioned individuals by name. Instead, the writing focused on collective entities, groups, families, or professions. Some scientists believe this reflects a fundamentally different kind of society, one less centered on hierarchy and more on shared identity. In other words, the language itself may reflect a culture that valued cooperation over dominance. The AI also uncovered what appeared to be a set of standardized numerical markers. These could have been used for accounting or planning, perhaps related to agriculture or trade. Certain patterns suggest they used a base 10 counting system, which would make the Indus Valley one of the earliest known cultures to apply mathematical regularity to its economy. Combined with evidence of sophisticated urban design, drainage systems, uniform brick measurements, and planned city layouts, it paints a picture of a civilization that prized order and precision in every aspect of life. Not everything the AI found was easy to interpret. Some phrases remain ambiguous, possibly idiomatic, or symbolic beyond modern understanding, but a few fragments seemed almost poetic. One seal, translated roughly, appeared to say something akin to, "The river remembers." Another, "Truth flows through all." Whether these are literal or metaphorical translations, they hint at a culture that saw language as both functional and spiritual, a means of recording the world while also honoring it. These discoveries have forced archaeologists and linguists to rethink what kind of civilization the Indus people really were. Far from being a mysterious or primitive society, they may have been one of the earliest examples of a complex, literate culture that valued reason, fairness, and harmony long before those ideas had names elsewhere. And yet, the implications stretch even further. If these translations hold up, they don't just rewrite the history of South Asia, they challenge what we thought we knew about how language and civilization evolve. The ripple effect in science and archaeology. The decoding of the Indus script didn't just answer old questions, it created entirely new ones. Almost immediately, scientists and historians began reassessing long-held assumptions about where and how complex language began. For decades, most textbooks placed Mesopotamia and Egypt at the center of early literacy, treating the Indus Valley as an impressive but mysterious outlier. Now, that narrative is being rewritten. The discovery proved that the Indus script was not only a true written language, but also one used for practical and civic purposes. This meant that the people of the Indus Valley were engaging in record-keeping, governance, and trade through written communication roughly around the same time as Sumerians and Egyptians, or possibly even earlier. If those dates hold, it pushes the timeline of South Asian literacy back several centuries and places the region firmly among the world's first literate societies. The implications ripple far beyond linguistics. Archaeologists now see new connections between the Indus Valley and its neighbors in Mesopotamia, Iran, and Central Asia. Seals and symbols that once looked like isolated designs are being reevaluated as parts of a wider network of trade and cultural exchange. Some of the Indus inscriptions even resemble marks found on artifacts in distant ports, like Bahrain and Oman, suggesting the civilization's influence may have stretched farther than previously believed. For linguists, the AI breakthrough also changes how lost scripts can be approached. Instead of relying on lucky discoveries like bilingual tablets, scientists can now use computational models to detect structure and syntax directly from the text itself. The success of the Indus project has already inspired similar efforts to decode other ancient languages, such as Linear A from Crete and the Rongorongo script of Easter Island. In essence, The Indus case became proof that machines can assist in recovering entire voices from history. Historians are also revisiting the story of human communication itself. If the Indus language truly shared structural features with later Dravidian tongues, it could mean that millions of people today still speak distant echoes of that same linguistic heritage. That connection reframes South Asian cultural identity as part of one of humanity's longest continuous narratives. But the broader takeaway might be philosophical. For years, the Indus Valley was described as mute because its words were unreadable. Now, those words are beginning to speak again, not through human intuition, but through technology. And in doing so, they're forcing science to bridge its oldest divide, the gap between data and meaning, between what we can measure and what we can feel. Each new line of decoded text invites a larger question about how civilizations communicate and how much of ourselves we leave behind in writing. The Indus discovery isn't just a technical milestone. It's a reminder that language, even when lost for millennia, can still find its way back into human understanding. And to grasp just how extraordinary this civilization really was, we have to look beyond the symbols to the people and the world they built thousands of years ago. The silent giant civilization. Long before the pyramids reached their full height, or the ziggurats of Mesopotamia touched the sky, a thriving civilization stretched across what is now Pakistan and northwest India. The Indus Valley civilization, also known as the Harappan civilization, wasn't built around kings, wars, or monuments. It was built around people and planning. Between roughly 3,300 and 1,300 BCE, the Indus people constructed one of the most organized urban societies the world had ever seen. Their cities were remarkable. Harappa and Mohenjo-Daro were laid out in precise grids, complete with drainage systems, standardized bricks, and public wells. Some homes had private bathrooms connected to underground sewers, an innovation that wouldn't appear again in many places for thousands of years. Streets were straight and evenly spaced, suggesting a city plan that valued function and equality over spectacle. There were no massive palaces or extravagant temples dominating the landscape. Instead, the architecture pointed toward shared civic order and practicality. Trade was at the heart of it all. Archaeologists have found beads, pottery, and seals from the Indus region in ancient Mesopotamia.
But people of the Indus Valley were trading with Mesopotamians as early as 3500 BCE. We also know that it was the largest of the ancient civilizations. Archaeologists have discovered more than 1,500 sites,
showing a vast network that connected South Asia to the Middle East. The seals often featured animals, human figures, and, of course, the mysterious script that baffled scholars for so long. These objects weren't just decorative. They were identifiers, tools for communication in a world already humming with exchange. Even without deciphering their writing, historians could tell the Indus people valued stability and community. Evidence of widespread conflict or standing armies is almost non-existent. Weapons are rare compared to tools, jewelry, and household items. The cities appear to have been ruled not by a single monarch, but possibly by councils or community leaders. Power, it seems, was distributed rather than concentrated, an unusual feature for early civilizations. Their craftsmanship was equally advanced. The Indus people mastered metallurgy, producing copper tools and ornaments with intricate detail. They developed standardized weights and measures, which allowed for fair trade across vast distances. Artifacts suggest a society that blended practicality with aesthetics, figurines, toys, and amulets that reveal creativity and emotion in everyday life. The more archaeologists uncover, the clearer it becomes that this was not a simple or primitive culture. It was one of balance, intelligence, and quiet sophistication. And yet, For all their achievements, their story went silent for millennia. Their cities fell to dust, their rivers changed course, and their script became an unsolved enigma. Without words, their ideas and voices faded from history's memory until now. With AI finally decoding their language, that silence is breaking. The Indus people are no longer just builders of cities. They are storytellers again, speaking across 4,000 years through symbols that have finally been heard. Understanding who they were is more than a historical exercise. It's a rediscovery of a civilization that may have understood balance and community better than many that came after. Now that their voices are finally being heard, one question lingers. Were the Indus people simply advanced for their time, or were they trying to show us something we still haven't learned? A civilization ahead of its time. The more researchers uncover about the Indus Valley civilization, the more it challenges the usual story of human progress. For decades, early history has been told as a sequence of empires, of kings, conquests, and monumental structures. But the Indus Valley doesn't fit that pattern. It thrived for nearly 1,000 years without evidence of war, tyranny, or social collapse on the scale seen elsewhere. Instead of glory carved in stone, it left behind order, equality, and remarkable stability. The decoded script only strengthens that impression. The language reflects cooperation and shared responsibility rather than power and domination. The people who built Harappa and Mohenjo-Daro seemed less concerned with rulers and more focused on systems, drainage, trade, civic design, and daily fairness. In their writings, there are hints of laws and moral codes, but few signs of self-glorification. It's as if their civilization was engineered around collective well-being rather than individual fame. That idea stands in sharp contrast to how we often define advanced societies. The Indus people measured progress not by conquest, but by functionality and balance. Their cities were sustainable, their economy well-regulated, and their craftsmanship efficient. There's no record of vast inequalities or opulent tombs for the elite. The language of their artifacts suggests a society that prized order, practicality, and perhaps even empathy. In a sense, they achieved a form of civic maturity that modern societies still struggle to maintain. What's more, the values found in their decoded texts, fairness, equality, harmony with nature, echo deeply in modern environmental and social philosophies. It raises the possibility that the Indus worldview wasn't lost so much as dormant, waiting to be rediscovered in a time that finally understands its relevance. Their quiet success story, overshadowed for millennia by louder empires, now feels more like a mirror than a relic. Rethinking the Indus Valley means rethinking civilization itself. If greatness isn't about how much land is conquered or how tall a monument stands, but about how well people live together, then the Indus people were far ahead of their time. The AI decoding didn't just recover a lost language, it restored a vision of society grounded in logic, equality, and respect for the natural world. Maybe the Indus people were never lost at all. Maybe we just finally learned how to listen. Subscribe for more content like this, and don't forget we'd love to hear from you too in the section below.